Okay, we are on top of Gimel Amud Aleph. And we're at the 2 dots, about 6 lines down. First one line is Chayte Karibe. Hareini, because somebody says I should be like this. So the Gemara says, "Nay, nami tofas b'sayri hareini kazel le'amar." So the previous case in the Mishnah was a case of he says ahona, this should be beautiful. So the Gemara says, what exactly is he talking about? The Gemara says he's holding on to his hair. So he's grasping his hair, and he says ahona, this should be beautiful. Now, in the situation of Hareini Kazeh, presumably it's the same scenario. He's holding his hair, and he says he should be like his hair. It doesn't really say much. How exactly do you become a Nazir? So the Gemara says, no, it's not a continuation where he's grasping his hair, but rather Amar Shmuel Nazir over Lefanov. It wasn't a scenario where he's grabbing his hair and saying, I should be like my hair. It's a scenario where there was somebody walking in front of him who was a Nazir. So he says, I should be like that person, and that's why he's a Nazir. Okay. Hareini misalsal. My hair is gonna grow. Now, obviously, here the word salsal means to grow. So the Gemara says, how do we know that what he's referring to here, the word silsil, is being associated with his hair? So the Gemara says, so if anyone recalls from other Masechtas, remember exactly, it was Megillah and other places, Rosh Hashanah, the maidservants of Rebbe were experts in language. You have the guy with the masters in English language driving a taxi. So this was a story in Rebbe's house. They all had masters of Hebrew. They were all very proficient Aramaic speakers. And whenever the rabbis had a question, they used to always go to the Amsa Devei Rebbe, the maidservant of Rebbe's house, and they always knew the answer. Not only that, but sometimes they got pretty provocative too. They would admonish the students and tell them what to do. So a pretty active and a pretty active crew over there. Okay, so he goes to one of Rebbe's maidservants. Amsa Devei Rebbe. So this maidservant told somebody else, Lahu Gavra, presumably he had a nice hairstyle in front of his head, and he was always twirling it. So she says to him, how long are you going to twirl your hair? And again, because this is the what they call the Hochdeutsch, for those who speak German. This was she used a very proper formal language, and the word she used was misalsal. Evidently, silsal means to grow your hair. The Gemara says Ema Torah. Maybe it's a reference to studying Torah. To siv salsalo Torah Mecca. Just give me a second here. I looked at the word yesterday. I can't remember how they translate that word in English. Salsalo Torah Mecca. Extoller. It means, in other words, Hareini misalsal means that I'm going to talk about how beautiful the Torah is. Sort of a compliment. So the Gemara says, Amar Shmuel, Hachanami Tofas B'Sari. We're talking about a scenario where he's holding on to his hair and he says, I'm going to grow this. Evidently, it means he wants to become a Nazir. Okay, next scenario is Hareini Mechalkel. Mechalkel means I'll let my hair down. But of course, Kilkul has a lot of other meanings. Kalkola means a basket. It also means to support somebody. Like we'll see in the Gemara. The Gemara says, Mimai Hadain Kilkul Sari. Sari, how do we know that when it says he's going to grow his hair, when he's going to grow, it means his hair? Because it's not what we learned. On Shabbos, yesterday, we spoke about this on Shabbos, and there's no Erev. One is prohibited to carry. Transportation of an object is prohibited on Shabbos. How much do you need to transfer to violate the prohibition? Obviously, it's got to be some amount of it. What's the measurement? So the Gemara says if a guy is carrying plaster, Ketran Sid, and this plaster is also used to Yehudah, I remember they lost it kilkul. it's enough sid. Apparently, this would be very helpful to press the here in a specific way. If you wanted to press your here, you'd put plaster over it, and then remove it, obviously. So Rabbi Yehudah says enough of this plaster to do one braid. Rav says, what is this bas tzida? It's a certain type of braids. Okay, evidently, it seems that the word kilkel is associated with here. Okay, the Gemara says, Ema mazin aniyeh. Maybe it's talking about supporting the poor people, because the word kilkel, kakola, also means to support poor people. Like the pasuk says, Vayichalkel Yosef es Aviv es Echov. Yosef supported his father and his brother. It's also a scenario that when he says Hareini Mechalkel, it means he's holding on to his here. If he doesn't, it could be he's making a commitment to support poor people. Okay. If a guy says, I'm going to be Mishaleach Para. So what does Shaleach mean? So Shaleach could mean to grow. It also can mean to send, which are a bit different. Sending means you take what you have and you give it away. Whereas growing means it grows. So Shaleach Para, the Mishnah presumes, means he's going to grow his here. And obviously the question of the Mishnah is, how do we know it means to grow? How do we know that the word shiluach here means to grow? Like the pasuk says, this is a verse in Shir Hashirim, and obviously Shir Hashirim is a love song between God and Jewish people. It's a two-way song, so to speak. And the word shalachayich is a reference to the here. So God extols Jewish people's here, Jewish people as a woman, as it were, calling it shalachayich. Your here, Pardes Remainim, is like a orchard of pomegranates. Evidently, see here, shalachayich means to grow. The Gemara says, "Aim amidi de avure." Maybe it means to send something. He takes water, and he sends the water to whatever needs water, its final destination. Evidently, this is an example where God takes something and gives it away. It's not an example of growing. So the word shalach here means like to send a shliach, to send a messenger. God sends the water, but he takes it away from where it was and puts it somewhere else. So maybe to the contrary, maybe shalach para actually means he's going to cut his hair. It means I'm going to take my hair, I'm going to send it to the garbage. So the Gemara says, Tana para yalaf. The reason, one second. The reason why shalach over here means to grow is because para is a reference to the hair. Well, how is it a reference? Sifach, it says over here, kadosh yeh gadol para. It says in reference to Nazir, he's going to be holy, he's going to grow his hair. Uksiv hasam gabi kayin hedyet upera lo yishalechem. By kayin, it says a kayin needs to take a haircut every 30 days in order to be able to serve. And what's the language used? Upera, his hair, lo yishalechu, he shouldn't grow, he shouldn't send it. No, he shouldn't grow it, because if it's sending it, then obviously that's what he's supposed to do. He's supposed to be cutting his hair every 30 days. It's evidently shalach para in the scenario of kayin hedyet. What it actually means is a kayin is forbidden to grow his hair, and therefore by Nazir it means the opposite. It means he's committing to grow his hair. Another possibility. Hai shalach mayim nami ribuhu. The reference of sending water is not actually a reference of the shalach, is not a reference on the water. What it means is the water is going to cause the crops to grow. The crops will be shalach. So the word shalach there doesn't mean to send, it means actually to grow. Now, you look in Taisus obviously points out that there are so many examples where shalach clearly means to send. For example, in Parshas Vayishlach Yaakov Malachin, Yaakov sends messengers. He didn't grow messengers, right? Same thing when you send the mother bird, right? What does the Torah say? Shalach to shalach hasa'im. You got to send the mother bird. You don't grow a mother bird. 1 second. Yeah, Taisa says that the truth of the matter is the Gemara wasn't at the maskana of the Gemara wasn't really depending on this verse. So the true limud would be from a kain growing his hair, where it says upera lo yishalechu. Okay, next Gemara. This Gemara is a bit different than I explained in the Mishnah, and let's see it. Harei alay tziporin. If a guy says, I'm accepting to bring birds, Rabbi Meir says he's a Nazir, Chacham say he's not a Nazir. Now, when does a Nazir bring birds? He brings birds at the conclusion of his Nazirus, and or if he becomes a Nazir Tameh. He also needs to bring these birds. Now, he's not the only one to bring birds. A Mitzvah brings 2 birds, right? As part of as part of him re-entering the camp, he needs to sacrifice 2 birds. And obviously, an individual who wants to bring a sacrifice of a bird is more than welcome to. If he wants to bring 2 birds, he can bring 2 birds as well. So the question is, why is it that these birds are associated with Nazirus? Okay, there are multiple versions of this Gemara. I'm going to stick to Taisus here. Harei alay tziporin. You're a Meir or Nazir. Meir says if you accept to bring birds, Meir says you become a Nazir. My taimo, dear Meir. What's the reason of Meir? Amar Shlakish says tziporin smuchen l'seir. Kibbel. He accepted the birds that are next to the hair. Okay, what does this mean? 1 second. We'll go with the Taisus here. According to Taisus, what it actually means is he didn't say I'm accepting to bring birds. He says I'm accepting to bring birds that are spoken about next to the hair. What does that mean? Dechsev, as the verse says, Al disare kinishrin rabo, v'tafrohi kitziporin. 1 second. Yeah, so he grew his hair like eagles, and his nails were grown like birds' claws. Okay, now, since he's accepting the birds that are referenced close to the hair, but what it really means is that he's accepting to grow his hair, which is a reference to Nazir. So saying Harei alay tziporin is not enough. You have to say Harei alay tziporin smuchen l'seir. I'm accepting the birds that come close to the growing of hair, which is a reference to Nazir. Okay. Rameir Savar matfis inish b'midi samachlei. Rameir says you can accept a neder through this idea of smuchen because the birds in one pasuk are next to the hair. So it's a reference to accepting to grow your hair and become a Nazir.
You're trying to go through all these obscure ways to become a Nazir.
That's a good question. It's a good question.
Crazy.
Well, so I would say that this one is the most bizarre of all of them because the other ones.
The connections seem a bit tenuous.
Yeah, this is certainly a connection. That's why the Gemara says machlekes. Now, in general, most of them, there could be sort of a spontaneous desire to become a Nazir.
Right.
So, or his desire to show appreciation to somebody else. That's why he might say something like "aha," and when there's his friend the Nazir is walking in front of him, and then the fact that there's some idioms or slang, that kind of also makes sense. Somebody's giving an elaborate speech and he wants to become a Nazir, and he doesn't want to say I'm a Nazir. He says, "I'm going to grow my hair," or something like that. But this one where he compares he says, I'm going to be like the birds next to the here is a bit tenuous. It's a bit tenuous of a linkage, and it's also a bit tenuous why somebody would even say that. Yeah. If you look in the Rush, the Rush has another explanation here. It makes everyone's trying to tighten this up a little bit because right now it seems a bit tenuous.
Mm-hmm.
According to one version of the Rishonim, he actually doesn't even have to say Tziparim Smuchim L'Sar. He just says Tziparim, and because in one pasuk Tziparim are close to Seir, birds are next to the here, so that means he's becoming a Nazir. It's very tenuous. So the Rosh tightens it up a little more. He says a few things happened here. First of all, the guy says, I want to be like the birds next to the here. And also there was a Nazir walking in front of him. No. According to Tosfos, he actually clarifies that what he meant was to become a Nazir. And as we said before, if there's some small amount of alternative possibility, then that could be clarified by telling us what his intention was. Why he chose such terminology, that's a little beyond me. Okay, so Ramera says that the fact that they're written in the same verse is sufficient enough to understand that what he wants to do is become an Nazir. For Rabbanan Sabri, loimat, top of Gimel Beis, the rabbis say loimatfis inish b'midi d'samachlei. The rabbis say a person does not accept a neder through something that is, the fact that they're listed close together in the same verse. Okay. Excuse me 1 second. Rabbi Yochanan says, "The kula alma loy matfis." Rabbi Yochanan says that everyone agrees that a person is not matfit. 1 second. Again, Rabbi Yochanan Amar the kula alma loy matfis. Rabbi Yochanan says that everybody's opinion is that a person is not matfis. 1 second. In other words, the fact that here and birds appear in the same verse is not sufficient grounds to understand that what he's trying to do is become a Nazir. El-Hainu Time of Rav Meir, what's the reason of Rav Meir that says that he accepts to become a Nazir? Techashina and Shema Tziperi Nazir Tomei Kibul Alav. 1 second. In other words, because a Nazir Tomei brings 2 birds, so that's a way of referencing that he wants to become a Nazir. So the Gemara says, Michti, let's examine this. Chashin and Kamar, you're telling me that it's a suspicion. We're not certain what he meant. If that's the case, then maybe we should suspect that he just wants to bring a gift of 2 birds and nothing to do with Naziris at all. So Gemara says that can't be, because Imkain Hareya like Kamni Bailey. He would have said, I want to bring a birds, not the birds. Like the birds with a capital T evidently implies it's the birds of Nazir Tomei. So the Gemara says, Vadilma Hareya like Tziparim Mitzara Kamar. Maybe he's referencing the birds of a Mitzara, somebody who has a spiritual affliction that's trying to re-enter the camp after he was kicked out. So the Gemara says, Nazir over Lafanov. There was a Nazir walking in front of him, and evidently he's referencing the fact that he wants to become a Nazir. Maybe we're talking about when the Nazir is Tomei, and we're trying to exempt him from his sacrifices. In other words, what he's saying is, you're a Nazir Tomei. You need to bring 2 birds, And because you happen to be walking in front of me right now, I'm going to bring two birds for you. He's sort of accepting responsibility. He doesn't want to become a Nazir. He just wants to take over the responsibilities of this Nazir Tameh, who has to bring two birds.
Rabbi,
Yes.
if they also bring a stone, is it a case of bringing two birds with one stone?
So the Gemara says, "V'dil Nazir Tameh lepoitrim mekavanais of kamar." I'm sorry. So the Gemara says, "Genjay Nazir Tahar over lefanav," where Nazir Tahar was walking in front of him. Okay, give me a second here. Okay, so let's just review the opinion of Rabbi Yehudah. Rabbi Yehudah is explaining as follows: the two birds are brought by a Nazir Tameh, and when he says he wants to bring two birds, he means he wants to bring the thing. He wants the thing that brings the two birds, or that could result in bringing two birds, which is Nazir. And obviously, we're talking about a scenario where there's a Nazir Tahar who's standing in front of him, and it's sort of saying, "I want to be like you." Where he says, "I want to be in the position, which is your position, that could result in me having to bring two birds." Okay, so now what's the difference between the opinion of Rabbi Yehudah and the opinion of Rish Lakish? My benayu, what's the difference? Going to Amar Tzipar and Asmuch Lasar Alai. So we'll go through Rosh here just to tighten the screws here. Basically, there was a Nazir walking in front of him, and instead of saying I'm going to bring birds, he said, "I want to be like the birds next to the here." And there's a Nazir in front of him. According to Rish Lakish, then you become a Nazir. According to Rabbi Yehudah, you do not become a Nazir. The Rabbi Yehudah Afgad Amar Hachi Nazir over the fun of in Eloi Loi. 1 second. It's a long taste of sin. Okay, 1 second. Hold on. Okay, we'll have to backtrack a little bit. Okay. According to Taisvis, in Rish Lakish's opinion, if you say Sipar and Asmuch Lasar, meaning I'm accepting that which is next to the birds, which is growing your hair, growing his hair. So in that case, he's a Nazir, even if there is no Nazir in front of him. According to Rabbi Yehudah, he'd only be a Nazir if there was a Nazir in front of him. And the reference here is that he'll bring the birds that this person might have to bring if he becomes Tameh. In other words, he wants to be in a situation that will cause him to have to bring birds the same way this person would have to bring birds, because this person's a Nazir. 1 second. Okay. So the Rabbi Yehudah Afgad Amar Hachi Nazir over the fun of Inei Loi Loi. According to Rabbi Yehudah, if you say I want to bring birds, there has to be a Nazir walking in front of you. The Rabbi Shimon Lakish Afgad the Ein Nazir over the fun of it, as long as he says Siparin Hasmuch and Lasar, meaning I'm accepting that which is written next to the birds. In other words, growing my hair to become a Nazir. So then, even if there's no Nazir walking in front of him, he still becomes a Nazir. So the Gemara says, so the Gemara, in other words, Rabbi Yehudah here clearly disagrees with Rish Lakish. That's because presumably Rabbi Yehudah holds that you cannot be matfis b'samach. In other words, the fact that two things are close together in the Torah and referenced together doesn't necessarily indicate anything with regard to a person's individual commitment. And according to Rabbi Yochanan, this is true even of Rabbi Meir. There is no opinion that says, according to Rabbi Yochanan, that the fact that two words are written in the same pasuk is enough to indicate to us that there is a neder being made. Okay, so Gemara says, but obviously there is an opinion. Vatanya, we learn, Ta'imar Yamin Harezu Shavua. If a guy says, my right hand, I'm going to walk around the block, that's a Shavua. My timer, why is it a Shavua? Lab Mishun Nechsev, Vayoram Yaminai, Usmaila El Hashamayim Vayishava B'chai Ha'olam. Because we find somebody, 1 second, who is this by? This is by the Neil, where he lifts his hands to God and he swears. So evidently the hands, both the right hand and the left hand, are both referenced next to the word of Shvuah. So it's considered a commitment. And if that's the case, then we see here that there clearly is an opinion that says because they're listed in the same verse, the right hand and a Shvuah commitment, therefore they're considered one and the same thing. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, there isn't an opinion that says that because they're written together that makes a neder or Shvuah. So whose opinion is this? This would clearly seem to support the opinion of Rish Lakish that says that since they're written in the same pasuk, therefore, 1 second, because they're written in the same pasuk, therefore the association is enough to become a word of Shvuah. Okay, yeah, 1 second. So the Gemara says, no, the reason why the right hand is a word of Shvuah, Yamin is a Shvuah, is not because it's written in the same pasuk, but actually the word Yamin means Shvuah. Where do we see that? Amri Lai, Mishum Yamin Gufayik or Shvuah. Because the right hand itself is called a Shvuah. The Tanya we learn, Minayan La'imar Yamin Shi Shvuah. How do we know that somebody who says the word Yamin is considered a Shvuah? Shenemar Nishba Hashem B'Yaminai. Nishba Hashem B'Yaminai. 1 second, because the pasuk says God swore by his right hand. So you see here that the right hand is a word of swearing. It's a word of shvuah, of commitment, of a promise. Okay, and how do you know that the left hand is also a shvuah? When God made a promise, he promised with his right hand and with his left hand. Evidently, both hands are used as a word of shvuah. So the word yamin is not a word of association because it's written in the same verse as shvuah, but actually you could make a shvuah promise with the right hand.
The right hand was always associated with strength. Where is it?
Yeah, it's true.
Where the left hand comes in.
True. So but the truth here is that the hand is not even, in this case, not associated with strength, it's associated with commitment.
Okay, so the left hand you're saying is associated.
It's also associated because the verse says God swore basically by his hands. That means that the swear word, so to speak, was literally his hands.
Okay. But you see, he didn't just say with my right hand.
He says B'yamina ubizroya uzay, with my right hand and with the other with my hand of strength. Now, God, so to speak, we're created in the image of God if we have two hands.
Right.
So to speak, God will only make a shvuah with two hands. So if the right hand is already taken, the other hand is going to have to be the left hand. Okay. We together? Perfect. Okay. Mishnah. Hareini Nazir min hachartzanim umin hazagim umin hatagalachas. Let me get the exact words here. We're going to have to use these words. Okay, here we are. Chartzanim are seeds, zagin are peels. Now, every part of the grape is prohibited. The verse specifically says, from the pit to the peel, he cannot eat it. Or from tagalachas, it's cutting his hair. Umenatuma, or from becoming impure to dead people. Okay, what does this mean? This mission is where a guy accepts one restriction of Nazir. He says, I'm a Nazir, but I'm only prohibited from eating grape seeds. or I'm a Nazir and I'm only prohibited from cutting my hair. Everything else I don't want to accept. The Gemara says, "Harayz a Nazir." He becomes a Nazir, but Kollel tukin Nizir himself, and he's a regular Nazir. There's no such thing as a partial Nazir. You do the Naziris, you're a complete, full-fledged Nazir.
Partial Nazir sounds like a Portland kind of idea.
But how could he be a Nazir if he only selects?
So we're saying here it's just like he says, I'm going to grow my hair.
Yeah.
What about everything else? Well, no, you're doing the whole thing. So here, if you're clearly referencing that you want to become a Nazir, but you start making exceptions,
Right.
so then the Nazir part works and the exceptions don't work.
Oh.
So, it's sort of if you make a contract with conditions, and these conditions are disallowed by law. So most contracts say some line at the end saying they're like, if any clause is invalid, then that clause is invalid, the rest of the contract is valid. So he made invalid clauses in his contract, and those clauses were redlined,
Okay.
and the rest of the contract is valid, and therefore he becomes a Nazir.
Gotcha. Oh, my.
Okay, the next is one long Gemara, so I think we'll stop here.
Look.
Yeah. Okay, let's see one tomorrow.